to wrestling, gumbo to grits, politics to poetry, and all things Southern in between, this is Take on the South. Produced by the Institute for Southern Studies in the McCausland College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina, Take on the South explores the highs and lows of the American South, examines the truth and fictions of the country's most distinctive region, and picks the brains of some of its most accomplished students. To understand the South, you need to take it on, and that's what we'll be doing. Join us as we take on the South. Stories. Telling them, sharing them, repeating them, making them. Some have said that stories constitute the essence of the American South. Today, Take on the South shares one with you that shows Southern stories at work. I'm Mark Smith, Director of the Institute for Southern Studies, and I'm your host today. Our story begins with the ancient art of tattooing in a modern setting. Our guest today is Spirit the Tattoo Artist, one of Columbia's leading and most talented of his guild. Spirit, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for having me.
We're going to share our story with listeners today. It is, as you will discover, once a story born of chance, but it's also the history of the American South. A story shaped by art and the past, one indebted to happenstance, but also a product of two inquisitive minds talking about their own pasts and the meaning of tattoos in a southern and even a transatlantic setting. We begin 4 years ago. I wanted, for a very specific reason, a very specific type of tattoo. And after a lot of research into Columbia's extremely rich and talented tattooing scene, I found Spirit. I sent him an email, and that email read as follows. I'm thinking of getting a rendition of a tattoo my father got in 1957. I have two pictures of his very faded tattoo. It is difficult to fathom in detail, but I'd like one inspired by the original rather than a facsimile or direct copy. Now, this tattoo in question was old school, unapologetically simple, almost sepia in color. It was of an eagle. And I'd grown up with that tattoo, its presence marking my entire childhood and a good chunk of my adult life. Getting something like it, something approximating its style and its age, was to me a way to honor my father. It was time. Spirit and I exchanged multiple emails trying to get the design just right until he invited me to come into the shop a few months later. Spirit, take it from there.
So as soon as you came into the tattoo shop, I wanted you to see the image because I had that exact image hanging in my booth. And that image was something that was painted by my tattoo mentor. And as soon as I saw the picture that you sent, I recognized it immediately. And I do believe that you were a little surprised that I was able to recognize it.
Surprised would be putting it mildly. I was shocked. And more than that, if I remember correctly, you have lots of pictures that are up on the wall, and this was the very first one on the left. It was like a beginning, right? This was a kind of genealogy of your work and your inspiration from the past, correct?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I put it at the top for that reason. I put it at the top because I wanted people to understand that I have a lineage. I learned from someone that is far more advanced than I am. And that particular piece being at the top was something that he had created for that reason. He had created it as a type of zenith. Eagles flying high, eagles always kind of being at the top and things of that nature. So that's why I put it right there. And that was one of the reasons that I really wanted you to see it with your own eyes.
And I knew, yeah, that's right. So you could have taken a photograph and sent it to me, but you said, look, please come in. I want you to see this. And I'm so glad that you did, because it was really resonant, very powerful. And it had that same kind of coloration that I should imagine is quite difficult to replicate now. I don't know. But the color of it, for me, was key, because it suggested age and it suggested context. Because in 1957, when my dad had his done, there were certain colors you couldn't even get that you can get today. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
And so there's a definite coloration to this. I think also that the picture you showed me didn't have like a coffee mark on it, a coffee ring.
Yeah, it had a coffee ring that he literally sat his coffee mug down, and that ring was actually supposed to represent the sun.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, because my dad's originally had a sun on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know. It gets deeper, this story. So, all right, let's go back a bit. Who was this chap who taught you?
So his name is Derek Crockett, and he is currently tattooing in Charlotte, North Carolina. And what is kind of so special and amazing about him is, at the time in the South, we're very isolated here. Tattooing it's only been legal since about 2007. And so the teachers here are not as aged or as experienced as they would be if, tattooing had been legal ages ago. So I found him, and his lineage was such that he could trace his teachers back to the first tattoo artists that came to America. And so the methods that he's been trained in are these tried and true methods that have been, just refined over time. And not only has he taught me how to be a really strong and powerful tattoo artist with really great customer service skills, but just how to be a grown man. He was a really strong kind of father figure to me, which is just one of the reasons I was kind of so taken aback that you wanted that piece, because a man that I'd called my dad a lot painted that exact same piece, and that was cool right there, because you said that the piece was inspired by your father, and a man that I call my father painted that same piece. And so that was enough for me right there to say this is serendipity in action.
So this is just the first gesture towards serendipity, though, isn't it? Because ultimately, and you're entirely right, I'm coming in to sort of honor my father with a tattoo done in 1957 across the Atlantic, okay, in the UK. And there you are. Hang on a minute. This is Derek's first piece. He used this to teach me, and he was like my father. And poetic right there. I mean, the conversation could stop right there, and it would be interesting in and of itself. Absolutely. But it doesn't stop right there, does it? In fact, it goes much deeper and much more interesting, and really very poignant. So I think I came back. We made an appointment for like a week later, and I'd never had a tattoo before, and I'll never get another one. This is it. This is my one tattoo, because it's emotionally meaningful to me. And that's kind of what I do, right? This is it. And you knew that. It's like, okay, this is your one. I was like, yes, it is. All right. And because I had never done one before, you said, all right, come in, just I think it was in the afternoon, and bring a bottle of Coca-Cola with you. So, well, I never drink that stuff. So it's a good idea. And I asked you why. And you said, well, it's about a 3.5 hour tattoo. And your blood sugar level drops, and so you want to be sipping this gently throughout the process, right? It's very helpful advice, by the way, because I'm very glad that I had that extra kick of sugar. You started, and it wasn't as painful as I thought, but after a while it kind of gets to you. And we started talking, didn't we? And you asked me what I did, and I explained that I'd come from London many years ago to study slavery in the American South. That's my principal area of expertise and interest. I'd come all this way to look at the history of slavery, and especially in South Carolina. At which point you said, what?
I was like, well, I mean, I was kind of taken up because my father had written a dissertation on slaves and slavery in Spartanburg, South Carolina. But when I had told you this, I didn't know as much as you had later on shared with me. So all I really told you was, I know that my father had his PhD and he wrote his dissertation on slave crimes.
That's right. Yeah. So you said to me, and to your enduring credit,
it was just it was just in passing. It was like, oh, right. By the way,
Right. And to your enduring credit, you didn't pause. You kept on working. But I should imagine that you wanted to pause at that moment, but you kept doing. And he said, well, my father, he actually studied this stuff, I think, and I know something about what he did. And I said to you, well, what's your dad's name? And you said, it's William C. Henderson. And I said, wow, remarkably, I know your dad's work. And I know your dad's work because he pioneered some of the things that I study now. And I think we both paused at that moment and said, this is odd, this is interesting, that you finished up and we were just chatting about the implications of this. And I said, I'm going to find some of your dad's work and I'm going to send it to you. And it turns out that your dad graduated in 1978 from Northwestern University, one of the most prestigious universities in the country. And even before he defended his PhD, in 1977, he published a piece on slave trials in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And this is a really important piece, and people today still use it. And the reason why it's important is because in the Old South, there was no mechanism for enslaved people to record their words or even have their words recorded. Their stories were vanishing. They weren't allowed to read legally, and unless you happened to be an escaped slave, your words were never going to be recorded unless you went to slave trials and accessed their voice through the court system. Now, historians today do this routinely. By 1977, they were not doing this. Your dad was doing it, and that's how I knew about his work. So I ended up finding a couple of pieces and sending them to you. You also were very good. So, how's the tattoo? Yes, that's great, and it's looking fabulous. And I think this was just before Thanksgiving, if I'm correct. And I sent it to you. And what happened with the stuff that I told you about?
Well, let me also say that. So I'm 42, and my dad passed away when I was 11. So so the audience will know none of this information is information that I really knew about. I'd known that he was a PhD, he was a college professor, and that he did study African American history, and I knew a little bit about the dissertation, but I had no idea, about the profoundness of the work that he created, or that he was so prolific. And when I shared the information with my brothers and sisters, they had kind of already known the information, but me, I was the baby of the family. I was the one that was still kind of trying to figure out who I was in relationship to who I have examples of being like, right? And so, when somebody comes along and says, hey, I knew your father, and not only I knew your father, but I have his work here, and his work still lives on, and people are still studying from it. It just really gave me just a sense of kind of purpose, to say that this is my lineage, this is what I come from. My father's name is still being evoked. People are still using, the work that he studied way back in the day. I just can't tell you just how amazing that is.
And it's just, the connections are so manifest and multiple. But essentially what you're saying is that your father's legacy is so transcendent of time, right? Yes. Time and place. And that's precisely what a tattoo is, right? It's a kind of indelible marking that lingers beyond its moment of creation, right? And this is, 4 years ago, and this has stayed with both of us, hasn't it? Yeah. And I've shared it with a few people, and so that's amazing, that's remarkable. You've shared it with a few people too, or?
I haven't shared it so much because it's just so personal. It was so personal, and I don't know if I can just kind of recreate the experience using words on paper. But yeah, it's just been a really pivotal time in my life, and just the simple fact that tattooing brought it to me. Who would have thought that you would have come to me, in South Carolina from London, and we would have had this exchange. And I would say this is probably the second time that somebody did come to me and say, hey, I know your dad. But this is probably definitely the most intimate, and someone actually, saying that, hey, this is his work and this is something that I can show you. That's, it was really, really riveting. But yeah, I haven't shared it with too many people. I am thinking about it. I have an email list that I like to send to my clients and keep in touch with them. And so I was thinking about I did write a poem about the experience. And I was thinking about sharing it with my email list. I do have another piece that I brought that I think is a little kind of poignant to the experience that we had, just as far as we talk about the importance of stories throughout time and how time adds value to things. Can I share it?
Yeah, absolutely, please.
Okay. This is a piece that was painted by Eldzier Cortor. The first thing I notice about this piece is how easy it is on the eyes. Even though on the surface it seems very busy, the composition allows us for us to view it, and there's a very tranquil feeling as if you're a child having just discovered your grandmother's attic. It took me some enjoyable time to scan it from left to right to see why it was so touching and easy on the eyes. First off, the painting uses light and distance to keep certain things in the forefront, while others can recede in the background and await examination when you're ready. This piece has items that are familiar to me: Grandma's old china, the old gas lantern, a pinball machine, old records, a Bessie Smith poster, even a Coca-Cola on the wall as evidence of a bygone era. I love how muted the colors are. It gives it the idea that things are locked away in the past, and the items and the artwork now sit in a proverbial attic, collecting dust, whereas they were all items of adoration at one point. This is like all artwork in existence today. Often we get so caught in the age in which we currently reside, becoming discouraged about the seemingly unlimited items of creation that appear on the scene. Once the time period shifts to a new year, a new decade, all the artwork will forever remain locked in the time at which it was created. And what felt like infinity became infinite. Now the countless items that once bombarded your psyche are now in a very countable collection of works. This is the reason that it is imperative to keep creating, to keep making art. Your work is a tool used to learn about the time in which it was created. It all goes into the record of the past. I can sit and look at this piece for hours. Who knew that an ancient radio would one day become a relic? The man who painted this piece is Eldzier Cortor. He painted it for that very reason. He wanted to give these items dimension. The title of this piece is The Past Revisited, where he simply wanted to shed light on familiar items from the 1920s and 30s important to Black America. We are looking at this painting in retrospect, 100 years after these items were relevant, and they still have the ability, in just being everyday objects, to captivate us. History has a way of adding value to things. Create art now and every day.
That was absolutely poetic. And that was done when?
So the piece was painted in 1973.
And it's a retrospective to the 20s and 30s.
The 20s and 30s.
And it is an amazing piece of work. And I think you're precisely right. It captures this idea that art is an access point to history. But there's something, deeper than that, I think, going on here, isn't there? As you suggest, this is about a way of thinking about the past that renders it simultaneously in the past, but also speaks to our present, right? And I'm guessing that's where you're coming from, because, on a daily basis, you do art. That's what you do. When people come into your shop, Spirit, what is the kind of conventional, thing they want done? Just to kind of give us a day in the life, if you will. Do people call you? Do you get many emails like I sent you, or do they call you, or do they just come in?
It's all of that. It's all of that. They call, they text, they send emails, they do all of these things. I really just like I like to meet people. I like to just get a feel for them. I like to see the canvas that I'm working on. A lot of times, people are just coming in to tell their stories. That's generally what a tattoo is.
Yes.
It's how can I use my self-expression to make the outside world understand what's going on inside of me. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing lately was looking at ancient art, looking at art from the Renaissance and things of this nature. And so what that does is it allows me to use certain faculties to tell stories in a way with images you know. And that was kind of one of the things that I learned growing as an artist. Sometimes what will happen is you'll see a tattoo that, let's say, for instance, they'll want to represent strength. So they'll have a pair of boxing gloves, but the boxing gloves will have the word strength on it. So to me, that just speaks to the artist that doesn't necessarily understand how to use imagery to portray a meaning, right? And so that's something that's really been really fascinating to me, because using colors, using tonal value, using shape and form, you can plug into someone's subconscious and implant an idea.
Yeah. Yes. So you're the custodian of the idea, right? I mean, they come in, they say, "Well, here's what I'm thinking of," and you work very hard to interpret that would both satisfy the customer, but also give additional depth to their vision that they hadn't quite anticipated, right? Like there's a huge value added here. And in my case, it was the placement of the eagle. You placed it higher than we had originally suggested. You said, I'm going to go up a little bit, because you wanted the wing to shape the muscle. And that really was very important to me. And I'm forever grateful that you'd made that kind of executive artistic intervention. What are some of the challenges that you face as a tattoo artist in Columbia, South Carolina, or aren't there any?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would like to say that one of my biggest challenges is the same that Leonardo da Vinci had, and he said that he couldn't create the images that he had in his head because his hands were not equipped to recreate those images. And so that's my biggest challenge is being able to create the artwork that exists in my head. And I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I try every day to do just that.
Well,
and being in the South, I'm sorry to interrupt, but being in the South, just like I was saying, it can be very isolating, where we don't have access to a lot of the artists that are really doing it and really pioneering. They're pushing the boundaries. So we have to kind of go outside our comfort zone. We have to go outside of the South in order to get access to that type of work.
So where do you go for that? I mean, South Carolina, what they legalized tattooing, 2010 you said, was it?
It was like 20, yeah.
Something like that.
Roughly.
Is that true across other southern states like North Carolina and Georgia? Did they do it roughly the same time, or had they allowed it before that?
No, I would say the other southern states were the first to make it. They legalized it first, and then South Carolina was one of the last. I believe Oklahoma did it after South Carolina.
Is that right? So we were very late in the process.
Oh, very late.
So when you look for external inspiration, or at least part of those conversations that you need to execute your work, where do you go to? Do you go to other southern states, or is it a California conversation, a New York conversation?
It's all of that. Yeah, I have been to California. I have been to North Carolina, Virginia. I've been to Virginia Beach, and these are all areas that I can go and learn from other artists. A lot of times there'll be seminars that I really enjoy going to seminars. Yeah, where they just they give industry secrets, and this is kind of something that's a little new to the tattoo industry, is the education. We're kind of experiencing a bit of a renaissance with tattooing, because so many people are getting into it as a result of the television and the tattoo shows and things like that. So luckily, we're coming up in a really great time now, where there is a lot of education that is available. Whereas before, people were very close knit. There were gatekeepers that didn't want anybody to really know what they knew how to do.
So this is a good thing in your estimation, this sort of democratization of the tattoo artist. This is a good thing, right?
I think so. I understand the angst behind it. I understand that with the older tattoo artists, they're like, oh, hoity-toity, they don't really like the fact that it's so democratized. But I mean, if you look at art or tattooing as a living, breathing entity, then it has to grow. It has to, and it will break the barriers that have constrained it for so long, And so, yeah, no, I think it's great. And whoever I can teach, whoever has questions, I am all answers. That's how we all get better.
So generational knowledge passed down, but also is kind of professionalized through these seminars and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I gotcha. Understood. All right, so sort of circle back a little bit. I'm very happy with the majestic work that you did for me, and our story. And it is our story in a way. It's not me or you, it's both of us. That's a story that has remained with us. And I probably talk about it more than you do, but you write about it more than I do. And I think it was probably a few months ago that you dropped me a line, checking in on the tattoo and see how it was. Which I really like that follow-up. It was very, very helpful from my perspective. But you also said, look, I've written something here. And I wrote a poem about our encounter. And we've printed it, and I'd very much like it if you could read that poem for our listeners, because I think it captures so much of what we experienced in a way that your regular prose can't do. So if you'd, would you be open to reading it for us?
I would be very happy to read it for you.
Thank you.
And also, I didn't get a chance to say thank you so much for having me on your show. It is
Spirit. It is our pleasure.
Honor.
It really is. And I mean, I do think that Take on the South, if it's to have a fidelity to the South, has to talk about the South and all of its glorious subtleties and details. And tattoo artists are a really important part of that conversation. So we're actually honored to have you on the show. But before you read it, if people want to look at your work, what's the easiest access point for them to do that?
The easiest way that you can look at my work is go to my website, tattoosbyspirit.com. Everything is spelled correctly. The same is Instagram, Tattoos by Spirit.
Perfect. All right. If you could take us out by reading your poem, I'll be forever in your debt.
A client called about a tattoo. He needed help identifying a tattoo that his father wore. Upon receiving the picture, I immediately recognized it. It was the iconic traditional eagle, rings spread. Though the tattoo had aged, ink long dispersed, it still held its glory. And lo, that same eagle sat atop my workspace. That same eagle sat in the form of a painting that a man that I often called Dad painted. That painting over my booth sits. It gives watch over my work, created by a man I call my dad. The time for the ink had commenced, and while the ink poured and the machines buzzed, conversation ensued, and the usual "what brought you here" summoned an answer that would change the course of my history. He was on an academic mission in South Carolina to learn of slavery's brutal history. I told him of my father, who studied slave crimes and penned a dissertation, though I had never been privy to it. I was thus proud to share. To even more of my surprise, more of my father was revealed to me, that he was a prolific writer, having created works that are the quintessential on slavery in South Carolina. William C. Henderson passed away at age 47 in 1991. His youngest son was 11. That was me. While tattooing an image of an eagle flying high, zenith. Stories about my father abound, but nothing of his academic prowess. The poetry of this entire dynamic from the beginning. A gentleman needed help recognizing a tattoo worn by his father. The same image sits atop my work. The same image was painted by Derek Crockett, a man that often calls me his son, and one of the men that I often call Dad. The client was in South Carolina to study slavery, and my real dad studied slave crimes. The dissertation that I had never seen was emailed to me, and I was able to learn of the genius that he was. While I was able to help this client to become closer to his father, he helped me become even closer to mine.
Spirit, artist, friend, thank you for being on Take on the South.
Very, very much.
was our take on the South. Let us know yours. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at U of SC South. Be sure to click and subscribe. Take on the South is produced by the Institute for Southern Studies and the McCausland College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina. Special thanks to Professor Dave Garner of the University of South Carolina School of Music for composing our soundtrack. Tune in next time for another Take on the South.